After months of waiting, the open beta for MultiVersus has finally arrived, and I'm happy to report that it's another great addition to the platform fighter genre since Smash Bros. Ultimate received its final fighter back in October, the very same month Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl released. But instead of doing a comparison between both MultiVersus and Nick Brawl, because they're both licensed games, which would be a bit unfair given MultiVersus is still in its beta stages and definitely needs some more work before even making any full-blown comparisons to Nick Brawl, which is pretty much a completed game. So basically, I just want to give my thoughts on the game based on what I've played so far, as well as go over some issues that need to be addressed, and all that good stuff. But before we begin, I have to mention that I'm just talking about the free, most basic version you can get, which requires a lot of grinding in order to get stuff like costumes and other things as part of the Battle Pass system. There is a faster way of doing this, but there was absolutely no way I was paying these prices to unlock stuff faster in these other editions, which are an upwards of $100, my gosh. Now, you would think just playing the game would be enough to start unlocking things, right? Well, there's a catch. Gleamium is only obtained by purchasing it with real money, and it's the primary thing that's needed to buy characters, which can also be done with gold, variant skins, emotes, and announcer packs, oh boy. But if you're like me and don't have a great internet connection, it'll result in a bunch of lag like you're seeing here, not being able to move, the game spawning the wrong character, or simply getting booted out of the game, then you're pretty much screwed. Because online play, whether it be against bots or other people, is the only way to get gold and progress through the Battle Pass. And if you decide to play locally, you get absolutely nothing in return. Great! At least with CTR Nitro Fueled, it didn't matter what mode you decided to play on, whether it be the main adventure mode, time trials, arenas, local or online multiplayer, as long as your console was connected to the internet while doing these things, you were always getting Wumpa coins to use for new stuff. And the Wumpa coins themselves were completely optional to purchase if you don't want to do all that grinding, which made them non-invasive. Now, we could use the excuse that since MultiVersus is a free-to-play game that you don't have to purchase, this could just be the developers trying to earn back their budget, but even then, compared to other free games out there like Sonic Dash or Angry Birds, which do have similar forms of microtransactions, they were never invasive, as you can still unlock everything without them. And I'm hoping MultiVersus can introduce a system like CTRs, so the microtransactions aren't as invasive due to slower internet speeds. But enough about that, let's move on to the actual gameplay. If you're familiar with Smash Bros. And even Nick Brawl, then it shouldn't take too long to get acquainted with the controls and the overall feel of the game. You've got items, characters that feel great to control, a perk system in the vein of Smash Ultimate's spirits, and even a combo system for every character when repeating the same attack. Something Nick Brawl didn't focus too much on aside from a few characters, and instead having more of a focus on combining fast, strong, and special attacks together. But with all that combined, MultiVersus does wind up feeling a bit faster and more complex in terms of mechanics, simply due to how many combinations are possible. Tom and Jerry is a really good example of this, and has become my main as a result. I will not let anyone touch Jerry, and if they do, I will avenge him. So basically, in concept, Tom and Jerry act as sort of a clone to Rosalina and Luma from Smash Bros. However, instead of the duo acting like a mirror duplicate of them, these two actually work together. Well, actually, they're technically fighting each other, which leads to a more varied and hilarious moveset. For example, Tom can launch Jerry with a slingshot, either accidentally off a platform or into enemies to cause damage, but press the same button again, and Tom will launch a tennis ball that Jerry will send back to Tom, and Tom can knock it toward an enemy. Now, when I first saw this, I legit thought it was the funniest thing ever, but it also wound up being the cleverest thing I've seen so far in a platform fighter game. But the duo can also have two versions of the same move, depending if Tom and Jerry are together or separate. Together, Tom will tie Jerry to a remote control rocket, which functions similarly to Jenny's rocket power move in Nick Brawl. The only exception is Tom can't move while doing this. When separated, Tom will kick a mini rocket into the air, affecting anyone in its path, and it's honestly pretty cool how this moveset was handled. The same goes for the other characters like Bugs Bunny, who is my second main. However, unlike the other two games, MultiVersus lacks any kind of running-based moves, which I will admit was a little jarring after coming off of those two games, but I did manage to get used to it after a while. Concerning the heavily marketed teamwork aspect of the game, I can't really give any comment about that because the local play only gives me the option to go one-on-one against another player instead of giving me the option to add a couple of CPU fighters to the mix. Even online with a CPU partner, I still couldn't get a good feel for it due to all of the lag, so that kinda sucked. And until MultiVersus adds local CPUs to the game, Smash Bros. And Nick Brawl win this round for being way more offline friendly. And since I brought that up, I do have to mention that MultiVersus takes a long time to start up every single time you want to play the game. So I kinda have to give this one to Nick Brawl and Smash Bros. As well, because with them, you can start up the game immediately and start playing, because they don't rely on an internet connection like MultiVersus. Now, to be fair, this could just be my internet connection, but I just wanted to throw that out there. In terms of recovery, I did find it a bit more limiting than the other two games, with the main exception being is you can grab the outside walls of the respective arenas and then climb them all the way back up to safety. If safety means getting pummeled by another character anyways. And this is where MultiVersus kinda diverts away from the other games in the genre, instead of not being able to grab them whatsoever in the other games, wherein you'll mainly rely on up specials to get back to safety. Regarding the game's current roster, there's only 17 characters in total, 18 when Season 1 starts. It's a rather small number in comparison to Nick Brawl's current 23 and eventual 25 character roster, and of course, Smash Ultimate's, gosh, I lost count of how many characters are in Smash. But I would imagine MultiVersus' roster number will grow in time. Currently speaking, we have Shaggy and Velma from Scooby-Doo, Batman, Harley Quinn, Superman, and Wonder Woman from DC Comics, Bugs Bunny and Taz from Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry, Iron Giant, who's much bigger and heavier compared to everyone else, 2 characters from both Adventure Time and Steven Universe, Arya Stark from Game of Thrones, a brand new character created exclusively for the game, Rain Dog, and of course, LeBron James. I just can't get over them still trying to promote Space Jam 2 over a year after it released. Another character could have easily filled this slot. And while I don't care for half the characters that are present, which are either thrown in here because they're popular, modern, or simply active, I'm honestly more so looking forward to the characters that were actually leaked, because of the nostalgia I have for these series, like Johnny Bravo, Samurai Jack, the Animaniacs, Duck Dodgers, and of course Scooby-Doo himself, when or if they eventually make their way into the game, that is. The stage selection is also pretty small, if you don't count the different versions of each stage. There's Scooby's Haunted Mansion, Tree Fort, Trophy's Edge, the Batcave, and Sky Arena, and each of them have different interactive elements like breakable walls and trapdoors, with Scooby-Doo's making multiple references to the show, and even the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo. Honestly didn't expect that one. There's also the lab, no, not that lab, which is a simple stage where you can learn the game's various mechanics and try out all the various costumes in any stage, as well as being the only place where you can actually bring in CPU fighters but can't play against them in local play with another player. I'm so confused. In terms of the music, I've only heard the versions represented in the streamer mode feature simply because I was recording footage for this video, and honestly, the Batcave and Scooby's Mansion tracks do sound pretty good. Other than that, nothing really stuck out to me like Smash Bros. Or Nick Brawl did. Oh, and before I forget, I'm sure you guys are aware of the game receiving a T for teen rating, and one of the reasons for that is the use of language. And if you're like me and don't want to hear any sort of swearing coming from your characters, just uncheck this box in the settings, which should already be off by default. And honestly, I think this is a pretty good idea that other games should incorporate, because popular games like the Uncharted series I really enjoy, despite having semi-frequent swearing in them, and that kinda prevents me from enjoying them as much as I should, so this feature would definitely help content creators who want to ensure their content is as clean as possible, especially if you're doing walkthroughs or streaming, or simply because you don't want anyone really young to hear that stuff, simply because they want to play as Tom and Jerry or Bugs Bunny. But since I just brought up the voice acting, it's actually a bit more dynamic compared to Nick Brawl's, with characters directing lines to their respective enemies, instead of lines being connected to certain moves, which is pretty cool.
That ringdog fella's probably just a scary dude in a costume.
Oh, Taz, they're putting your portrait in the Hall of Shame.
But with that said, this game does have a ton of settings to work with, including the audio department, which does have a problem. While there's an option to adjust the dialogue volume, there is absolutely no way to adjust the announcer volume like Nick Brawl does.
Aim for the fences.
Match point. Blue team.
And it becomes rather annoying because you gotta keep the TV volume to a certain level so it's not too loud. At the same time, you can't really hear what the individual characters are saying, let alone the music. Again, MultiVersus is still in the beta stages right now, so it's gonna have some issues, and I'm hoping some of them I've mentioned in this video can be addressed relatively soon, because from what I've played, this game is really good, and it has potential. So while you're waiting for the next DLC for Nick Brawl to drop, go check out MultiVersus, it'll be worth your time. And with that said guys, that's about it for this video. As usual, what do you guys think of MultiVersus so far? And what characters, stages, or features would you like to see added in the future? Be sure to leave everything down in the comments section below, and as always, thank you all so much for watching and for the constant support. I've been Blue Knight, and I'll see you guys back here next time.